I want to congratulate the Broadband Commission, set up and co-chaired by ITU and UNESCO, for the Herculean efforts made since your creation in 2010, and especially now in the midst of a pandemic, to open up broadband access to all. And I want to start by praising the leadership of President Kagame and Carlos Slim, and applauding UNICEF and ITU's GIGA initiative, and in particular the work of Henrietta Fore, to connect over 800,000 schools in some of the most hard-to-reach places in 130 countries, work now underway that will be truly transformative. But you know how much more needs to be done. And in returning to address this commission I first spoke to at its outset, I want this time to speak about the scale of the children's emergency that the pandemic has exposed in a world already divided between rich and poor children. It is a divide intensifying because the rich and poor are now also the education rich and the education poor. And it is a divide that is becoming daily ever more entrenched because the education rich and education poor are also the internet rich and internet poor. It is shocking that today 2/3 of the world's school-aged children don't have access to the internet at home. Shocking too that 1/3, 463 million, don't have access to remote learning anywhere. The shortfall is serious enough in high-income countries where 1 in 8 children, 13%, have no internet access at home. But 94% of school-aged children in low-income countries have no such internet. And they are the children who we know need access most. And you know, it's not just an infrastructure gap that prevents them from learning over the internet. It's a content gap, for content must be developed, curated and localized to meet each country's needs. And it's a teacher training gap, for teachers and facilitators must be trained to use new technologies. And it comes down to a massive financing gap. And so UNICEF estimates that at least $5 billion annually, a total of 46 billions by 2030, will be needed just to deliver content development, teacher training, and individual devices. And that's 5 billion a year needed more on top of education's 40 billion a year external financing gap, which bilateral and multilateral aid has not bridged. So unless we take extraordinary action, the 2020s, the decade with the countdown to this SDG deadline, will see less done when we need to do far more. National education budgets are already being cut in 2/3 of the poorest countries. Education aid is down 2 billion from its pre-crisis peak. It is estimated it may take 6 years to get back to where we were at already unacceptably low pre-pandemic levels of funding of children. I say our children are better and have more potential than the underfunded, under-resourced education we offer them today. Education is supposed to bridge the gap between what we are and what we have it in ourselves to become. It is that promise that inspires us and drives us on. Instead of developing only some of the potential of some of our children in some of our countries, our commitment is to develop all of the potential of all of the children in all our countries. So I ask you to support the work GIGA is doing to finance school internet connections. It is building on the IFIM model we developed for vaccination. Donor countries prepared to pay the interest on borrowings so that we can front load expenditure on infrastructure. But we must cover not just one-off expenditures, but sustained investment in content, the online curriculum, and the training of teachers. So I ask you also to look seriously at IFID, the International Finance Facility for Education. Using guarantees from donors, IFID can leverage up their contributions so that for every 1 billion in guarantees and far less in grants, we can deliver nearly 5 billion in extra resources. This allowing our multilateral banks to make necessary and critical education investments to make connectivity work for children. We have heard the mantra "Build Back Better" innumerable times. Let's work together as a global community to translate these 3 words into real investments in digital inclusion and ensure that within this decade, our promise to be the first generation in history where every single child has schooling is finally delivered.